always start Friday Environment Forum with an acknowledgement of country, and that's just to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this forum takes place, and to show respect for the elders past and present. And we'd like to invite you all to welcome people in the local dialect, which is Wanya Nala. Thank you. Now, if you haven't been before, who hasn't been before to a Friday Forum? We've got a couple of new people here today. Well, a very special welcome to you. Are you locals? Local? Yeah? Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, it's great that we get some locals along. It's one of those things, isn't it? You think, I must come along, and you never get here. But pleased to see you today. So this is what we're all about, and we're really here to hopefully give you an enjoyable morning, and we always come along with the view that we're going to learn something, and that hopefully keeps the brain young. That's what my dear friend Cecily tells me. We don't remember how old Cecily is anymore, but it's significant, isn't it, Cecily? She's our elder statesman, so that's lovely. And I know why you're all here today, not to listen to me, but to listen to Professor Darryl Jones talking about these wonderful birds. So that is itself going to be very exciting. Now, I know it's not June the 8th, but we had a busy week last week with coal and other things, so I was really just holding on to this to remind us about how important the oceans are, because it is easy to take them for granted, and they are terribly important in the overall context of making sure we've got oxygen to breathe, making sure that they absorb a little bit of carbon dioxide, and of course, for many of the peoples around the world, they are the main source of food. So we really have to be aware how important the oceans are. Okay, while we're on the subject of oceans, the other thing we do each week at Friday Forum, if I'm able, is to find something that's happened in Queensland that I think is really positive. It's a positive outcome for Queensland. And the Australian Marine Conservation Society has yesterday published this, which is they're calling a win for our friends. And of course, this is a lovely dugong. Yes, so there's not that many of them left around, but dugongs are pretty important. So it's this is a win for them and for other of our sea creatures. And the Queensland Government has finally launched a sustainable fisheries strategy. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about it today because you might find that just a bit tedious and a bit long-winded, but I think it's suffice to say that it has been released, and that's a really good thing, and it's really trying to say what we've got to do. And the reason this is so important, and my notes are over there so I can't really quote you, but essentially a lot of the fishing, the commercial fishing that goes on, can do harm to some of the marine life. I think we're probably all aware of that, but particularly things like dugongs, dolphins, turtles can get caught up in fishing lines and fishing nets. And this, of course, causes a major problem. So this is an important document which I think you'd agree. However, it's not the end. Of course, with all of these government things that we talk about, what always happens is the government says this is what we're going to do, but who says they're really going to do it? We've got a bit of a gunner philosophy around the place at the moment. We do hope that it will happen, and also if there is an election, we need to make sure that the government is reminded of how important this particular strategy is. So it doesn't mean we can afford to sit back and say, that job's done. It's done up to a point, but we need to keep reminding the government about it, whatever government is in. And I'd like to say thanks to Mike Jones for this little piece of, a little gem here. I did not know about this, so that was a really interesting thing. Look at these bollards. Yeah? They're made from plastic bags and a bit of landfill. Isn't that amazing? Good story. Yeah, so just 3,500 plastic bags into each 14 kilogram bollard. There's obviously something else in there as well. But at least it is using up a lot of plastic bags. That's a really cool thing, I think. I've not heard of this before. But this particular company that takes the plastic bags and converts them into bollards is in Victoria. So the plastic bags are collected here and taken down to Victoria, converted into bollards and other things, and then brought back. There's a little bit of transportation and a bit of emissions involved in that process, but I think the idea is right, and the company in Victoria is looking to, potentially expand, certainly in the shorter term, to take more plastic bags from the Sunshine Coast. Now the question obviously is, how can you deposit these plastic bags? Coles. And Woolworths. David?
There is I spoke to the fellows at the Environment Day down at Marucci the other week.
Yep.
And there is a collection place at Caloundra.
Yep.
Caboolture.
Caboolture, that's right. I saw that online as well. There is a collection place in Caboolture, but Coles and Woolies will allow you to leave their beef bags. Coles does.
Woolworths taken to the tip.
Do they? Oh, right, okay. Well, Coles don't, I believe. Coles do collect them for good purposes. So
What's being done about Woolworths taking it to the tip?
yes, we don't know, Sandra, but that's a bigger issue than we can possibly perhaps manage, because that would be
I wonder about that.
Yeah, what the website, the Sunshine Coast website said Big W send their plastic bags to this place, but I thought that we'd just stick with Coles for the moment. But there are a number of recycling initiatives at Coles, and so you can take other soft plastics and other things that you can't put in your regular recycling bin. You can take them to Coles for recycling.
Well, I take my material bags.
Yeah.
And I I've only seen someone else do that once. Nobody's doing it.
Well, there are a number of people who are doing it, but I know the vast majority of people still are not. But that's great. Every little bit helps.
Know that there are others.
There are others. I can rest assured you that there are others. Okay. All right. Now we're going to invite Val. She's not got a real lot to say today, but she's going to update us a little bit on what's happening. So please welcome Val McLean.
Nothing very exciting today, but the palm-headed rosellas have been eating this vine, and now I see Sonia here, she might be able to positively identify it. We thought it was a corky-cation vine. It's got the purplish blue fruit on it. The palm-headed rosellas have been eating this vine down there, or eating the fruit off the vine for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And this morning they were hell-bent on eating all the green ones, not just the ripe ones. So they really like it. So I'll hand it to Sonia in a minute and we'll positively identify it. It's apparently in the passion fruit family, but that's as far as we can get. It's interesting that they come back there and they just sit quietly on the back of the rest of the weeds down there near the creek and nibble away on the fruit on the trees. Now, Di, I wasn't going to say any more, but Di has got me stirred up again because she's talking about the creatures in the ocean being affected by plastic bags or whatever. We saw there was 11, 12 of us down there in the park this morning, down here in this open area, and we were in six groups of 6 standing around, and this balloon floats over the air. So I'm in one group mouthing off and doing my I hate balloon thing, and then I went over to see what the other group was saying because they seemed to be all excited about something, so I went over to see what they were on about, and they were up in arms about the balloon flying around in the air. But they were saying about, who was it? Best and Less, that were allowing the children to let balloons go as a promotional thing. Well, they weren't letting them go. They were saying they weren't letting them go, but they were using it as a promotional thing. Oh, these kids are having fun with these balloons. And, no, we didn't let them go. No. Why are they doing it anyway? And, what can we do about it? Because it's not good for the environment. Not good for anything. But this one was floating away in the sky this morning.
That's the end of it, I'm not getting any more on that.
Thank you, Valda. Please thank Valda and her work. The balloon soapbox, we've been on that, Valda, a number of times, and it is a very valid soapbox, I think, to stand on and complain about the problems of balloons. I know the Sunshine Coast Council has had a strategy, or whatever you might call it, a policy. I think we need a bit of volume. If someone would like to adjust the volume, is there anyone in the room? No, there's no one. Okay. Sorry, tech help is someone else. Hello, is that better? Is that better? Okay, all right. So I know we've got a lot of people out the back today. Anyway. The Sunshine Coast Council has a policy on balloon letting, but the problem is with all of these policies is that no one actually monitors it. And if someone contravenes it, then the only way they're going to actually be held to account is if there is a complaint regarding the letting off of the balloons. So it's not a bad idea for those of you who saw, or if you know about Best and Less doing something, to complain to the Noosa Council, complain to the Sunshine Coast Council, because this is the only way you're going to get action. Because the councils are aware of the issue, and are aware and they have policies, but policies, what does it mean? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to introduce Rod Jamieson now. Rod, you're very, very familiar with Rod. And those of you who were here last week will know we spent a long time talking about coal. And I think Rod thinks that we had left a few things unsaid and that we should add a little bit to it to add to your information. So please make Rod Jamieson welcome.
Yeah, we talked quite a lot about Colton last week, the new mine on the Susan River just at the mouth of the Mary. And also, everyone's very familiar with Adani. And I just wanted to underline why it's worth doing everything you can to prevent these mines going ahead locally, but also globally. Hopefully I'll get the right button. You've probably seen these sort of pie charts before. This is fairly recent information, I think, from 2015. And all it does is, on a global basis, it outlines where greenhouse gas emissions, GHG, come from, depending on sector or industrial activity or whatever. And the biggest single one is this: electricity and heat production, but primarily electricity. It counts for 25% of the greenhouse gas production around the world. It is the number one biggest. Agriculture is nearly as big, but agriculture is a much more diverse source. So we're going to talk about electricity, and for a very good reason. What do we do about that? What can we do about the greenhouse gases coming from electricity? Well, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Control, and they are the climate scientists, there is robust evidence and very high confidence that we have to decarbonise electricity generation around the planet if we have a hope of keeping temperature rise, global warming, below 2 degrees by the end of the century. Now, if you're not familiar with why 2 degrees is important, you need to go back and do some homework. But 2 degrees is regarded as the maximum that we can tolerate without serious disruption of the ecosystems of our planet. In other words, disruptions to agricultural productivity, disruptions to wildlife, disruptions to the environment. Already we're approaching 1 degree and we're starting to see some impacts. By the time we get to 2 degrees above the global average, it's starting to get serious. If we happen to hit 4 degrees, it's sort of, close the door and go home. So we need to decarbonise electricity because that's the thing producing 25% of the climate change gases. And replacing coal is the best starting point. And the reason for that is we can do it. We know how to do it. We have alternatives to coal, and it has the single biggest direct impact. This is the sources of fuel used to produce, or energy sources used to produce electricity around the world. And you'll see that coal and natural gas are by far the biggest. You can argue about whether coal should be a little bigger, because some years it goes to higher at about 40%, other years, depending on the price of gas and the relative price of coal, it'll drop back a bit. But coal and gas are about the same. They're each about 35%, 33%. Similarly with nuclear and hydro, depending on where in the world the rain is falling and how much hydro is available, nuclear and hydro are about the same. And then there's only a little bit of electricity produced from oil. That percentage shown there is probably slightly higher, in fact. And wind and solar, and it includes biomass and a few others. That's a small percentage up the top, that little orange one. But if we look at the greenhouse gases produced from electricity production, 70% of those come from coal. So even though coal is only about 35% of the fuel, it's about 70% of the greenhouse gases. And natural gas accounts for almost all of the rest. Nuclear doesn't produce very much greenhouse gas, just a little bit for running the systems there, if they've got generators and diesel engines. Obviously solar and wind, etc. There's not a lot of greenhouse gas comes out of that. Coal accounts for about 18% of the world total of greenhouse gas emissions in electricity production. That's huge. If you can stop coal, you knock out 18%. You do a bit more than that. One of the things the IPCC points out is that it's actually not that difficult to get rid of coal and gas eventually. And then that has a flow-on effect. Once you've got a big, reliable supply of electricity without carbon that's not producing greenhouse gases, that starts to have a flow-on effect to transport. And you may remember that first pie chart I showed you, transport is about 14% of the greenhouse gases. It'll have a flow-on effect of industry, mining and smelting and things like that. That's another 21%. And suddenly, just by getting rid of coal and then doing something with gas, you're having an impact on 60% of the greenhouse gases the world is pumping out. Now that's a big chunk. That's really making some progress. 60% is worth chasing, but it starts by doing something about coal. So let's, Di last week talked a bit about the different kinds of coal, and I just thought I'd point out a little detail here. The kind of coal that most of the world uses for electricity production is thermal coal, sometimes referred to as steaming coal. It's the dirty stuff that we want to try and get rid of. And almost all of that's used for electricity. There's another kind called coking coal, that's what we use for making pig iron and steel, etc., etc. And it's questionable whether there are alternatives available exactly today. But it's actually not a big percent of the world's coal. And then there's the lignite, the brown coal, the Latrobe Valley, eastern Germany, etc., etc., parts of China and parts of India. That's filthy muck. It's not much better than burning peat. And the quicker we stop that as a planet, the better off we're all going to be. So if we look at the total global coal production, about 80% of it can be replaced within the electricity production cycle. Find better ways to produce electricity, and you've got rid of a lot of greenhouse gases. So those are interesting numbers just to keep in the back of your mind. But if we look at the forecast, and this is the bad news, if we look at the forecast for coal production and consumption for the next 23 years, going out to 2040, you'll see that it really doesn't change from where we are today. The world is planning to keep on burning coal at exactly the same rate, or even a little more than we are today. Yes, renewables are going to go up. That's that nice green band across the bottom. Natural gas is also going to increase. While natural gas produces greenhouse gases, it's not as much as coal, so that's kind of a relative benefit. Nuclear doesn't produce a whole lot, and maybe nuclear is going to be not such a bad thing. And oil isn't changing. The amount of oil that gets used for electricity production isn't going to change a whole lot. But that big black coal band in the middle, that is a problem, because it's not showing any signs of going away, and it's the one that needs to. And it's not what the IPC would like to see. Their recommendation is to decarbonise the electricity production sector. And the world says no, and that means that we're going to struggle to keep the global rise in temperature below 2 degrees by the end of the century. It might not happen, we might just go straight over the top. The numbers were put together in, I think this was March 2016. Yeah, right, there you go, May 2016. That's before Donald Trump freed up the US coal industry and said we want to burn more coal. So the outlook is probably worse than that. So how do we replace coal? Well, the first thing is you keep it in the ground, and that doesn't seem to be working terribly well. We fight against new mines and expanded mines, and this is where you start to come in. We encourage alternatives. We need to be open-minded, and that's why I'm thinking, let's rethink where we are in nuclear. Let's not be quite so tough on gas. They are probably going to be better than coal. We need to reward progress. We need to punish offenders. How do we do that? When we vote. And when we tell other people about these problems and let them vote. That's the power that we've got, is the power to punish people at the polling booth. And you can let your elected representatives know what you want to do. And we discussed this a little bit last week. This is why I was hoping Elle would be here, because she asked for this list. She said, can someone put together a list of the various ministers and local reps who might be open to these kinds of calls? And so I have put it together for you, and I'm not expecting you to remember that. I've got some hard copies here. But just for interest, I spent half an hour yesterday while the kitchen was being painted, phoning these guys up. Josh Frydenberg's office, I got a pretty good response, and when I said I want to add my register the opinion, it's up to you. I've also included Keith Pitt, who's the member for Hinkler, which is just over the border from Maryborough electorate, the Susan River, and pointed out that if you're the member for Hinkler, you would be very worried about the Colton coal mine, because all the crap that's going to flow out of that mine is going to end up wrecking Great Sandy Strait, which lies right across the middle of your electorate. So that's something you don't want to happen. So Keith Pitt should be paying a lot of attention, and Ted Sorensen, similarly down the bottom, the member for Harvey Bay, should also be paying a lot of attention. And when I phoned that office, they didn't seem to know what I was talking about. So if a few more of you phone up and remind them and just point out the risks that they're facing, maybe he'll go over and punch out Bruce Saunders and get a response. And maybe Bruce doesn't need punching out. But certainly that line should stop. And Frydenberg's office is very aware that there is a very big concern there. And even though it's actually officially past the date when you can make submissions, they're still listening and they're still putting names on lists. So as quickly as possible, phone up and do something about that. I've got here in my hand a dozen pieces of paper. Don't mean peace in our time. I hope they mean strife in our time. I'll pass 6 down each side. Please take one if you intend to make phone calls, otherwise pass them on. And if you don't get one, come and see me afterwards. We'll arrange for some more photocopies. Thanks, Di.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. That was brilliant, and it's a very good update. For those of you who are on the Lock the Gate circulation, you will have had an email yesterday about the Ackland coal mine, the expansion of the Ackland coal mine. We celebrated that a few weeks ago because EDO had won the case. And the Land Court declared that the Ackland coal mine expansion should not proceed because of the potential for groundwater pollution in the long term. And we all thought that was just fantastic. A little bit of a worry is that this Dr. Anthony Lyman from the Queensland Resources and Mines Department, he's the Minister. He has not yet said who. He hasn't said yay, he hasn't said nay, he said nothing. Now, if we sit back and do nothing, do you know what he might do? He just might sneak it in the back door while no one's looking. And so we need to be very active if we are going to make sure that that incredible win in the Land Court is actually followed through by the Queensland Government. Now, there was a little bit of a problem because Lock the Gate sent out the wrong phone number yesterday. And the lady that I spoke to said, oh, not another one. And I said, oh, sorry. She said, this is the wrong number. And I said, no, this is the right number. She said, no, it's not. So I think if you look at Rod's list here, that is the correct number. So if you'd also like, when you're registering your views, make sure you mention the Ackland coal mine and that we do expect the Queensland Minister to follow through with the recommendation from the Land Court. Because the only thing the Land Court can do is recommend.
Just following on from that, I'm not sure if you actually read the Land Court's description of New Hope, they're the company wanting to expand at Ackland and also the company wanting to build a mine at the Colton mine. They were described as mean and sneaky. This is the court.
Just very quickly, next week at Friday Environment Forum, we're moving on. Asian house geckos. Yes, who loves them? Ah, we've got a few people. Yeah, okay. Who hates them? Yeah. Okay, they do some good, there's some bad. They do bring out emotions in people, but you know, you've got an opportunity next week to hear from an expert, and we're going to have a chance to talk about them. So I think that'll be good. Well, they are very good at pest control, so other pests. Anyway, I'll let Jay tell you about that next week if you're here. And this is our program running forward. We've got some really good speakers coming along, so I hope you will be able to make it to come along to hear some of those.